All right, everyone, so just an update here. I've kind of started pulling the bike apart, kind of thinking about what I want to do with this thing. And I think I've come to a decision here. I think ultimately I'm not going to get into a full restoration. I'm not going to pull it apart. I'm not going to start redoing every single item on this bike. I don't necessarily have the time to do that, but I also don't think it's worth it, given the overall value of this bike and considering the fact that I'm not really an avid bike rider. I think ultimately what I am going to do is I'm going to get the bike running. I'm going to get it running in a safe enough condition that it can go up the street and back, 10, 15 miles an hour and be reliable. I don't think I'm going to be driving it avidly at this point because, like I said, number one, the tires are original on this thing, so I'm not sure I would take that out on, faster road. But I think ultimately the bike has sentimental value, whereas I would like to be able to, hand the key over to my dad and say, here, start it up and take it up the street and back. And I like to see him do that. After that, then we'll decide what to do with the thing. But I think I am going to kind of go through it and just use some elbow grease to clean it up in terms of, the fenders, the exhaust, some of the parts, give it a power wash and go through it that way. But I don't think I'm going to take it apart completely and start rebuilding engines and everything on it. I'm going to do the bare minimum, and that is rebuild the brake system, as the master cylinder and the caliper needed to be rebuilt. Rebuild the carbs. I need a new fuel line, I need to clean the exhaust out, and I need to address the fuel tank. I mean, mostly the fact that I can't get into it. After that point, I need to put a new battery in it, and it should be good to go to at least start it up and take it around the block. But I'm going to give you a quick overview of what I've done and some of the small steps I'm working on, and that'll be kind of an update for now. So with it apart, we can kind of get a better sense of the condition here. I did find, like I said in the previous video, a mouse nest, mostly in the airbox and in this corner here. So there's a lot of mouse urine and crap all over this engine here. In fact, a lot of these dark areas here, I'm pretty much assuming is mouse poop, these areas here. So here is the battery, which I pulled out of it. And it still does have some liquid in it. Obviously, you can see that it's bulging and it's not in the greatest shape. So this needs to be disposed of. The date on here, which is interesting, I found that looks like 87, but I asked my dad and he doesn't recall putting a battery in 1987. So we'll have to dig into it a little bit more to figure out where that came from. So on this side of the engine, you can kind of see overall, it's in the same general dirty condition here. The spark plug, I did find this side to be hand tight. So I'm not sure at what point somebody pulled a spark plug out. Plug looks to be decent condition. I've not had a chance to stick a borescope in there and see what the cylinder looks like. I did spray a little Marvel Mystery Oil in there. I drained the oil. It came out blue in color, which was a little surprising. It looked brand new. Again, no one can remember ever changing the oil on this bike. As far as everyone's concerned, it's the original oil, but I don't know if I believe that. It was a bright, clean blue oil. I did order a oil filter for this. I found an NOS filter on eBay, the correct Kawasaki one, so that's coming in. I started to take the cover off to pull. There's a plug behind the oil pump that I want to pull out and inspect the screen. So I started removing that. I did order the correct JIS screwdriver, but I don't have that yet. But I managed to get all the screws out. I did purchase the correct size bolts for this and Allen keys. I know it's not original correct, but I'm not really going for that here, I think. I just want to get the bike running. Most of the screws I did get out are in okay shape, so they could be reused. But if I'm going to pull this on and off a couple times for various reasons, I figure I just go with the Allen head screws. So as you can see, I did pull the master cylinder off. I left the original brake line here, which, as you can see, has a 1081 date on it. So I'm not sure how well I'm going to trust a 40-something-year-old brake line. I may change that out for stainless later on. But I removed the master cylinder, and I removed the caliper here. So unfortunately, I did not get pictures before I started cleaning them up, but I have begun painting the parts after cleaning them. I've got the rest of the parts in the box getting cleaned up. Here's the piston. I've cleaned and painted the caliper. And here's the kit that I found on eBay, BCF 401. Comes with your boot, your inner piston seal, your bleeder dust cap, and the two caliper pins, dust seals. So we're going to go ahead, I'm going to use some brake fluid. I'm going to install the inner seal, the piston, the boot, and then I'll go ahead and clean up the caliper pins and install those in the bracket. So I've got the inner seal in there. That was pretty easy to do. So my trick with installing piston boots is that first I slide it down over the piston all the way down to the bottom, kind of like a little skirt. It forms a cup. What I'll do then is I'll pour a little brake fluid in there, lubricate the piston, and then while I hold it upside down, I'll seat the outside edge of this skirt into the groove that goes around, and then I'll slowly work the piston in. The key is you have to have a lot of brake fluid to act as a lubricant, otherwise you're just going to end up fighting that the whole way in. And once you have that skirt started, you're simply going to walk this boot up the piston while you kind of work the piston in. And after a couple minutes of playing, I was able to get this seated. So you're really just going to continue to walk this boot up and push the piston down. The key is to press it in evenly, oops, like that, so you avoid sending it home. And as you can see, I shot a little of that excess brake fluid out here. So I'm going to assemble the caliper bracket, but this is no different than doing brakes in a car. I'm going to head and apply some grease, apply the boots, insert them in, and I'm going to go ahead and put the pads and everything and put this caliper back together. And here's the completed unit ready to be installed back on the bike. And the caliper is done and back on the bike. I'm not going to hook the brake line up yet. I'm going to wait until I finish the master cylinder, and then I'm going to bleed that through to purge the brake line out, and then I'll connect it. So here's the problem child, the master cylinder. The reason for all the corrosion I found was that the sight glass here had a large crack across it. Apparently something hit it, the bike must have fallen at some point. But it caused all the brake fluid to seep out, cover the entire MC, moisture got in, and it just started a whole chain reaction of corrosion. When I opened this up, it was a sort of sludge in there. So I've got a lot of elbow grease into cleaning this thing up here. As you can see, it still could use a little work, and I plan to continue to work at it. But the main issue is going to be the bore. And I'm going to see if I can get a good shot of this. Down the bore of the master cylinder, and as you can see, there's quite a bit of rust and corrosion in there. Now the piston wasn't in too bad of a shape. The boot was intact. The actual piston itself was not too corroded, and the seal seemed to be in good shape. So there might be some hope in reusing this, mostly because I cannot locate a rebuild kit, so I kind of have no choice. I went on eBay to look at conditioned master cylinders, looking at other models that had compatible master cylinders, and it seems like $50 buys you one in identical condition that I really don't want to take a chance on. A lot of them even advertise seized bores, so I certainly don't want to roll the dice on that. So I'm going to have to probably work with what I have here. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try honing this master cylinder. I mic'd it, and it's approximately 14 millimeters. So I've got a pair of 14 millimeter hones here. This one here I think is, I forget what it is. One is 160 grit and the other one is 600 grit. Use a little oil, go in here, put it on the end of my drill, go in the bore, hone it out. I do have an ultrasonic, so after I do that, I'm going to drop this in the ultrasonic bath, remove all the oils, see how it looks, and repeat until I can get a nice smooth bore for this. So here's first pass. A little tough to get the focus here, but as you can see, it kind of focuses. It did a pretty good job of cleaning that up. Now you can still see some ripples in the bore. there was a lot of pitting in here and rust, and I'm actually kind of happy at how that did so far. I did about 30 seconds with a 240 grit hone, and then 30 seconds with a 600 grit hone. Shined that up pretty good, but I think I'm going to do one more pass just to see if I can take down some of these ripples and then go from there. So one of my concerns, obviously, is taking off too much material. Now, I haven't really used the hone too much here. I've kind of only used it for 15 to 30 seconds for each grit. But along the way, I've been taking measurements using this tool here with the caliper. And it hasn't really taken off much material. So I think I started out at 1417, give or take. And some of the measurements I've been taking here are 14.16. So this is not too aggressive on the bore. But again, it's something I do want to be concerned about. Now, like I said before, my goal here is to really just be able to take the bike up the street and back. I'm not going to immediately start riding this. So if I have to replace this master cylinder, I will. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another pass or two with the 240 grit hone, just to really make sure I get all that surface rust out. And then I'm going to finish it up with the 600 grit. And then I'm going to put it back in the ultrasonic bath. So here's the bore after a couple more passes with the 600 grit hone. Again, I probably got maybe 10, 15 passes total down this, and I'm pretty happy with it. The camera and the reflections of the light are making it look like there's some scaling and stuff in there, but viewing with the naked eye, it's pretty smooth. It's definitely smooth enough to try, and I've certainly gone and measured this with the mic to confirm that I haven't removed significant amounts of material. So I'm still happy with it. I'm going to go ahead and assemble this after I paint it and put it back on the bike and test it. So I just test fit the piston. Seems to operate very well. My test fit works, so I'm going to go ahead, clean this up, paint it. All right, master cylinder is installed. New sight glass, some new hardware. I know I probably could have done a better job repainting this. I probably would have sandblasted it first and then painted it. But again, I just want to kind of get this running, especially if this ends up leaking. I don't want to put a whole lot of time into it. But I've cleaned the handle up. I've got some good return. Brake line's connected with new lines. I just need to go ahead and bleed this. So I want to purge through the line first just to get the gunk out. I'll go ahead and connect it to the caliper and then bleed it out. All right, it appears we have functional brakes. I've hopped on the bike and done some rolling through the garage, and it does grab pretty well. I've been checking for leaks in here. I don't have any, although I spilled a little brake fluid while I was trying to top this off and bleed it. So I'm going to go ahead and wash the MC and the caliper down with water just to prevent the brake fluid from eating through my paint. But pending a test drive, I think we're going to call this good. Yep, I would say that's pretty good. Although I've seen people reveal that my front forks may need to be rebuilt, because I can pretty much compress them all the way down. So in due time we'll address that. So I did end up pulling this cover off. I did an oil change, strained out the oil, pulled the original, I assume the original oil filter out. I have a new one on order. But I wanted to remove the oil pump, which is right there, to take a look at this particular pickup here. And mostly what I was concerned about was whether or not this pickup was clogged, and kind of happy to see that is perfectly clean in like new condition. So I'm going to go ahead and reinstall this along with the oil pump, and I have a new gasket that should be arriving today. I'm going to go ahead, clean this all around. I got a trash bag, put the bag over everything, clean the surface all the way around, and I'll reinstall this cover. My new oil filter should be here in roughly another day or so. At that point, I'll install the oil filter, I'll close this all up, and I think that'll wrap up what I'm going to do for this video. So I ended up throwing the oil filter housing in the ultrasonic, and as you can see, it cleaned it up perfectly. I did decide to replace the O-ring on here, and discovered it's a 70mm metric O-ring, but just I happen to have a -231 O-ring in my parts bin, and as you can see, it fits perfectly. Actually, it's not tight, has enough room to squeeze and stretch. And here it is all installed. I've put the new oil filter in. I've got the new clutch cover installed with the gasket. I did use the Allen head bolts here. I'll probably go back later on and change it out with the correct JS screws. But I'm not going to add oil yet. I'm going to kind of wait till the end. I'm going to kind of keep going through things first. So I do have the fuel tank off. And basically, as I took it off, the line just dry rotted and fell off. It's pretty clean underneath. It was completely empty. I'm assuming the gas just evaporated since it's been sitting since the 80s. But I still can't get into here. I've been spraying some penetrating fluid in there, trying to work the key in there to get it to turn, but I've got nothing. I don't want to drill it out just yet, so I'm going to still keep playing with that. I did manage to get the gas tank open. It's got some corrosion down in there. Not too bad. But I'm going to have to see how I can flush that. The underside of the cap shows corrosion as well. So I got a little bit of work cut out in front of me for cleaning this up. So I put this in the ultrasonic, and a couple minutes later, it started to clean up to the point where I was able to easily disassemble it. The spring started moving again. It was no longer locked up. So I'm going to go ahead and reassemble this, put a little oil in there, and it should be perfectly functional. And that appears to have done the trick. It's now functional again. Key works. It's actually in decent condition. I could probably polish that up, so I'm happy. Here's 24 hours with vinegar. It's a little tough to see in here, but from what I can see through the vinegar, it actually does look like it's done quite a good job of removing a lot of the surface rust. So I'm going to go ahead and probably let it say one more day. And then I'll flush this out. I use water, and I use a little baking soda to neutralize the vinegar. And then I'm going to probably put about a half gallon of gasoline with either maybe some transmission fluid or some Marble Mystery Oil just to coat the inside. And then we'll let it sit until I'm ready to fire the bike up. I have noticed that this gas cap does not seal very well. If I close it and move the tank around, I do notice that it does come out a little bit, so I'm going to have to address that. I don't know if it's the screws leaking or the actual seal itself. So I've rinsed the tank out with vinegar. I did a water and baking soda rinse. I fabricated just a little bit of a bracket here that'll kind of hold the rubber plate to the bottom. That way I can block the bottom off. And I filled the tank up with ATF. And this is cleaned up pretty well compared to when I took it off. Again, I still have a little bit of residue in here, but certainly enough to begin working. When I was doing my flushes, it was coming pretty clean. So I got about a quart of ATF in here. I'm just going to go ahead and let that kind of sit in there until I get ready to put gas in this thing. I'll drain the ATF out from the petcock hole, reinstall that, add about a gallon of gas. We'll go from there. So I took the opportunity to push the bike outside and give it a good wash. It had been covered with way too much mouse poop and grime that I really didn't feel comfortable working on it in that condition, so I wanted to at least get this off. So I gave it a quick spray with engine degreaser, pressure washed it off, and I was actually surprised that it came out pretty clean. There's still a little more work to do to this, but at least I can wrench on this without feeling grossed out. So I'll likely do it for this video. In the next video, I'm going to cover taking the carburetors apart and performing initial inspection. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching.